Thank you, thank you. And thank you, folks, for another time together on Living Right with Dr. Ray. I'm Dr. Ray Guarendi. Living Right, let's try to do that as best we can the next hour to take it out into the real world. We got Father Larry Richards coming today with Catechism Wisdom, our real child psychologist, a really child psychologist, Mary Grace. How can you not be holy with the name Mary Grace? Also, our cameras, our Living Right cameras, are heading into a home. I think they know we're there, but just in case, you're going to see what's going on in this place. And also, I have noticed over these episodes, we've got folks coming in from San Francisco, New York, Michigan, and today we have a group of folks coming in from Toronto, Canada. How nice of you guys. I really felt flattered until I found out you asked our producer for mileage. That's the only thing I didn't. Up to that point, I felt pretty good. My children are now from 24 down to 12. At one point, we had 10 under 12. I didn't go home. I did not go home. Usually we had Valium into the air ducts sprayed into the house so I could just be calmer. But if you've ever had the experience of a 5-year-old out in public, let me lay out the scenario. You're with your child in public. Somebody hands her a cookie. Manners make you look very good out in public. That's why children don't use them. So, you help her out. What do you say? And she looks at you like this is the first time in your life you've ever brought this concept up. What's the magic word? Now, being a veteran parent, you know how to make your point felt. You take these nails and you start to squeeze some fleshy body part. Say thank you. Ow! You're hurting me. In a fit of parental resolve, you take what's left of the cookie. You hand it back to the person who gave it to her, telling them, thank you. But she knows she needs to say thank you. She can't keep it. I prompted her 3 times just to avoid a scene. So whatever she says now, it's way too late. But thank you anyway. Does that person nowadays look at you and react, well, good for you? You know, you don't see parents doing that. Honey, you are very lucky to have a mother like this. Now, you don't understand it now, but you're going to understand it 20 years from now. What does that person now say? Oh, that's okay. Here you go, baby doll. I got 4 more bags for you because you live with a wicked witch of the West. Dear people, this is just manners. This isn't the big stuff. Morals, character, peers, dating, academics, media. Why are you getting grief for this? Simple. You have a standard, and you're enforcing it. Poll 100 people. How important is it for a child to adhere to high standards and to be well-disciplined? 97% of people agree with that statement wholeheartedly on paper. Until the time comes to do what you have to do to raise the kind of child that they say they will admire, then it's, oh, you're a little strict, aren't ya? Kind of controlling, are we? A little autocratic? Lighten up, kids got to be kids. I've been shrinking for a long time. I used to be like 6'9". I have watched good parents stand strong against attitudes and beliefs that are no longer on your side. And I've watched you raise kids against that flow. And many of you will hear at some point, even after you've been buffeted around by your standards, you got great kids. And as my wife would say, which is it? Do I have great kids? Or have I been a Mongol she-witch the past 15 years? It can't be both. Stand strong. You won't be understood all the time. You oftentimes won't be understood by the people you think should understand you, your peer group, your family, your friends. But you parent according to your standards. You don't parent by consensus, especially if the consensus isn't taking you where you want to go. And speaking of consensus, our Living Right cameras visit homes. We find scenarios that are common to the family situation. We've got one coming up right now, and I, having teenage children, have experienced this several times over. Let's see what happens to a real family with the real Living Right cameras, finding out exactly how they handle this kind of situation.
Friday? Okay, yeah. I'll call you back. All right, bye. Mom, Dad, do y'all think I could go on a date this Friday? It won't be just me. Elizabeth and Tiffany are gonna come too, so it's gonna be like a triple thing. Eric asked me out on a date. You know the guy I talked about all last year? I haven't seen him in a while because he dropped out of high school. He's changed a little bit though. He got his eyebrow pierced and this. And at first I didn't like that, but everybody else said it was cool, so I mean, it can't be that bad. But let me tell you the plans. We're gonna go to Tiffany's house and order pizza and watch movies the whole night. It's gonna be so much fun. Her parents aren't gonna be home, but you know I've been over there 100 times, so I know where everything's at. I forgot the best part. He's gonna pick me up on his motorcycle. Oh, he's such a dream.
Well, there's one question you always got to ask when your child wants to date. You have to ask, what's his middle name? And if your daughter says, Snake, then you know this is something you might want to think about. Okay. Now, first of all, did you notice she was very forthcoming? She gave him all kinds of information. Interesting. So that tells me they're laying the nice groundwork. Do we have anybody out here that has had a similar situation of a child wanting to date, wanting you to approve of the date, and you had a look on your face like that, like, do we have anybody? Yes, ma'am. Hold that up real close there, and your name?
Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
You have a daughter, a son?
I have a daughter who's 19 now, and when she was 15, she came home and told us that the coolest boy in school wanted to go out with her, of course.
Huh.
And I met him at lunch one day at school, and he wouldn't look me in the eye, and
He's too cool.
I was very nervous, and
You were nervous. Wait a minute. This is how things have changed. The parents' nervous.
so she was not allowed to date till she was 16, so that was the immediate rule. But of course, he was pressuring her to go out with him. So we did a lot of praying. We stuck by our guns and told her she was not allowed to date him. But it was several months of going back and forth with this, with him pushing her, because we, of course, were outdated.
She didn't come back to you and keep pushing you. From him pushing her, her pushing you.
Him pushing her pushing us.
And so she kept coming, huh?
Oh, yeah.
How'd you finally lay it to rest?
Well, I'd like to say we prayed him out, but I don't know exactly, but he finally went away.
You got an unlisted address is what you did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you stood your ground is what you did. I had a daughter at age 19 or 20 want to date a fella that we knew was trouble. There was real problems here. There, as my homeschooling wife would say, there were real problems here, Raymond. It's kind of tough living with your 9th grade English teacher. I told her if she snuck to meet this boy, automatically it would cost her $2,000 of her own money toward her college tuition. At that point, we were paying for her college. I said, Sarah, if this happens, and fortunately, like you, Debbie, she outgrew this fella. If this happens, this is what we're going to do. Would have broken my heart to do it, but I laid it out. Do we have other questions from the audience regarding the stuff of life? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Your name, dear?
Kathy.
Kathy, nice and close there. Kathy, what can we do for you, Kathy?
This question is about Christmas.
There is a Christmas.
Yes.
That's true. Okay, you shouldn't have a question about that.
Well, it concerns Christmas.
Concerns Christmas.
We have a number of grandchildren.
How many's a number?
52.
A number? How delicately put. How many? 199. Well, those are the ones in preschool. 52. Well, how many children do you have, Kathy?
Oh, we have 12 children.
12?
No, 11. I'm sorry.
You know, Kathy, I was going to ask your last name, but I'd get a little nervous about that. All righty.
Well,
Hold
I
that right
got
up there, yeah.
confused because they're all married, and now we have 22.
22, and you have 52 grandkids. Concerning Christmas, I know what's coming.
Yes. We bought gifts for all our grandchildren, but that ceased a few years ago, and I'm wondering what's your solution to that problem?
Oh, absolutely. What's the solution to the problem when you got 52 grandkids and she is, you got Dad over here just going, I just write the check. I don't even know what she gets them. You got to be fair. You tell the grandchildren, this Christmas, those of you with last names A through E will get gifts. Next Christmas, F through L will get gifts. I would imagine the simplest way to do this is money across the board, right? Now, I'm afraid to ask you what you give those children. Do you give money?
I am going to let my husband answer this.
Sir, your name?
Yes, I'm Bill Waters.
Hi, Bill.
Yes, we give money. Birthdays are a $20 bill and a $5 bill. And the birthday cake, of course, and ice cream and all this
Red Corvette.
everything else. Well, no, the son promised me a Corvette when he got out of dental school, but
Never came through,
Well,
did
he
he?
gave me a little one about this big. He
Give
said,
his
"Here's the
kids a buck
Corvette you
for
promised me."
Christmas.
to get." Anyhow, the kids at Christmas get everybody gets a brand new $50 bill. That
Will
I
you
run
be
off
my
my printing
father?
press. That I run off my magic printing press.
Jeez.
And in school, I give all the kids a $2 bill on their birthday, and they all ask me where I get it, and I said I have a magic tablecloth that I just put down, and I say, tablecloth, tablecloth, I need more $2 bills. And the kids, they don't really believe it, I don't think.
Do the math. 50 times 52, that's $2,600. Of course, the older kids are like, hey, wait a minute. I'm getting paid with cheaper dollars. Do we have other questions? Yes, ma'am. Your name?
Marilyn.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hey, Dr. Ray. I have 4 children, and the oldest are 12-year-old boys. And as they get
Makes Christmas seem kind of cheap, doesn't it?
right, just the 4. But now that they're 12 and they're seeing more of the culture, they're getting asked to movies with their friends, and a lot of their friends play music, and not all of it I think is good for them to hear. I'm getting a lot of influence from parents to say, you know, you're pretty strict. Once they're out of your house, there's really nothing you can do. It's out of your control.
It's the
Don't worry about
old,
it.
if you're too strict, they're going to rebel. They're going to go behind your back and run like wild animals.
So my 2 questions are, what do I say to these parents, and how do I continue to kind of shepherd my kids through the idea of all my other friends aren't subjected to all this rule-making stuff, so I shouldn't have to be either.
Well, the part about what you say to parents is pretty easy. That's simple. You can say, I've got to make my best judgment as a parent, and I'm taking my chances. And that pretty much shuts it down, because you're acknowledging, okay, maybe I'm not doing it as you think the bulk of parents would do it, but I've got to make these decisions. Now, how do you shepherd your kids? Dog. You ever get those big dogs, those things that kind of keep them in line like that? You could try that. The other thing is this, you're going to get grief. You're going to get grief from your kids. You know why? Because they're going to look around them and they're going to say, Mom, how could all those people be wrong and you be right? You need an answer for that, Marilyn. You need a soundbite. They are, and I am. That basically just says I have to do what I have to do. You can't expect them to like it. There's no way, especially nowadays when the rest of the culture is clinging to standards here and you're trying to cling to standards. Look at the gap. The gap is monstrous. We have time for one more quick one. One more quick one. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Ray, my name is Marlene,
Hi, Marlene.
and I'm a nurse. I do home health care. And one of the hardest situations that I come up with is we meet people who accuse us of taking things.
That is a very nice handbag you have there, just Marlene. I didn't want to say it. It looks brand new.
How do we best handle that, especially for our aides?
If you're getting accusations, that's one of the most common things that happens in the elderly who are starting to have what we shrinks would call some type of organic deterioration, okay? To argue with them is futile. Do not even think about it. Just if they say, you were here last time, and I'm missing my favorite shirt. I'm missing my favorite shirt. I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear that. I wouldn't want to take your favorite shirt. Not going to even argue, because you can't get through that kind of reality. This is not a difficult individual. This is not a person who's looking for a fight. This is an individual whose brain has actually convinced them, as much as these folks are sitting in this front row and that they have 796 children. The brain has actually convinced them that you're doing this. You cannot engage. You simply cannot. You sometimes can just look and go, I'm sorry you feel that way. Yeah, you simply do not battle that. Okay, one of my favorite colleagues in the Catholic media business, Al Kresta, along with Nick Thomm, co-author of a book, Moments of Grace, will be coming up here on Living Right with Dr. Ray. Don't go away. You do, you're taking a serious chance on losing IQ points.
What argument for the existence of God, for the supernatural, what do you think is most compelling in this generation?
You can't even take your next breath. That's how dependent you are. God could take your breath like that. So you can't be God of your life or your next breath. Who are you to be God of your own morality? It's a lie.
Thanks so much for still being here on Living Right with Dr. Ray. Again, my guest, a dear friend and a wildly popular host, Kresta in the Afternoon on EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Also, beautiful book, Moments of Grace, with Al and Nick Thomm, his co-author. Well, boys, I know, Al, I have seen you write. I think you were very smart to get a co-author. You know,
You've seen me write, but I'm
they
not.
don't like crayon. They don't like crayon.
I didn't know you could read. You've seen me write. You haven't read me, though. That's the problem, Ray.
How many books you got out now?
3 books and a few chapters in
Got
different
some
other
great
books.
stuff.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
know that. And I remember
Yeah.
reading your story
Yeah.
in Surprised by Truth. That's where I first met this fella, in Surprised by Truth. I remember reading his story, and one thing I did want to say, you didn't mention my name at all in it as an inspiration. I don't know why you left it out.
Your influence has been subsequent to.
Subsequent?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It hasn't. You just weren't there, man. That's.
Okay, I'm sorry. Now, I have to tell you, gentlemen, this Moments of Grace, what's the point? Why? Why did you write a book? Who inspired you? How were you inspired to put together these stories? It says, inspiring stories from well-known Catholics. Now, if they weren't well-known, now you got them in the book, they're well-known.
They're well known now.
Yeah.
Including you, by the way.
Well, by the way, I noticed my chapter was the shortest. I didn't want to say anything, just a thought. And I don't like the idea that I had the scratch and sniff chapter, you know?
Well, we're living in an age in which I spoke with Cardinal Avery Dulles before his passing. He was in the studio, and when we were off the air, we had interviewed on his book a revision of his history of apologetics. You know, this effort to defend the Catholic faith and to present the Catholic faith as true. And I asked him when it was over, I said, "Yeah, I'm curious, given your background, what do you think has been what argument for the existence of God, for the supernatural, what do you think is most compelling in this generation?" Because throughout history, different things work better given what people are thinking. He said, without a moment's thought, he said, "Oh, clearly, religious experience, spiritual experience."
Not the argument of
Right.
here are the apologetics defenses,
Right.
but a personal,
Yeah.
deeply felt encounter
Yes.
with Christ and with God.
That's right. So with that in mind, we went ahead and we had done a series of interviews on Kresta in the Afternoon dealing with people's most enduring spiritual moments or most enduring spiritual lessons. And so we went ahead, collected those interviews and edited them and worked with the interviewees, and we put together this book. I contributed an introductory chapter which makes the case that religious experience really is a bona fide argument, and we shouldn't
This is
be
not some
ashamed.
personal thing that somebody can say, well, that's you, Al, that's you, Nick.
No, people will often, you're right though, that's exactly the way people try to dismiss testimony stories. They just say, well, you know, it's subjective,
That's
it's
you.
just
I like
you.
my dog.
But you know, we would know very little about the Holocaust without the testimonies of survivors. We would know very little because the Nazis did not leave much documentary evidence. So we rely on testimony
For everything.
all over the place.
Except real religious experience. Nick, how'd you get involved?
Well, I produce Al's show, and so when we had this idea, we wanted to frame it so that it would be short. We didn't want testimony stories. A lot of the contributors in the book have full-blown conversion stories, testimony stories, book-length testimonies. We wanted to make it a moment that would be bite-sized yet impactful. There's humor in a lot of the stories. There are moments of conversion. We have a section of the book on the Damascus Road experience, and so these are the people that were, struck with a thunderbolt and changed their lives. There's a lot that were, kind of just slowly unfolding in people's lives. There's a great example of Jeff Cavins is in the book, and Jeff has a full-length testimony book. But he just told the story of when he dropped his daughter off at Franciscan University as a freshman. Mentioned, how as a father, his job was always to bring his daughter to the place where, she can survive on her own and live the faith. And he talked about going up to the giant steel cross at Steubenville that many people are familiar with. And he dropped off there and said, over all these years, my goal as a father has been to prepare you to put you at the feet of Jesus. And so this is where I want to leave you as a father, with you going out on your own, to leave you at the foot of the cross and to have Jesus watching over you. So it's those short, pithy moment type of stories that we wanted to capture.
Provoke thinking, provoke.
Yeah.
I remember I had a similar experience when I dropped my oldest daughter off at college. I cried, and it was because I kept thinking, how can I afford this tuition? I can't go out to breakfast anymore. Sobbing pretty good, I was. What are some themes? What are things that just surfaced in people's experience, encounter with Christ, with God?
Well, one of the chapters there is called "What You Win Them With is What You Win Them To." And the point is that people who come to Christ in a particular way, often for the remainder of their life, that will be how they present Christ.
That's the screen that they kind of
Yes.
see everything through.
Yeah, yeah.
Shrink's got a name for that. It's their template.
That's right. Well, what you win them with is what you win them to. And so we have a number of guests there. So, for instance, Father Pat Egan, the key moment in his life, he was already a priest, in fact, when the power of the resurrection hit him. Now, he believed in the resurrection, don't get me wrong. He was a good priest, faithful priest. But at one point in his ongoing spiritual journey, the power of the resurrection broke through and it revolutionized his ministry. And to this day, his
How, Al?
work.
Wait, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how? How did it break through? He's the guy's been a priest. How many years when he had this experience?
Yeah. Well, I think we all have many of us we believe what the church teaches, and we submit our hearts and minds to the teaching of the church. But sometimes particular doctrines seem spectral or ethereal. They're
Hard to grab?
They're hard to grasp. They don't. For instance, it's only been recently that I've come to emotionally appreciate the joy of heaven. Okay, I've always believed in heaven, and
That's because you're getting closer to it.
yeah, you've seen the breakdown.
This
then.
is as old as I've
The
ever been.
deterioration. Yeah. Well, it may well be, but that's part of it. Is that as we mature in the Christian life, certain doctrines become more vivid to us. And for him, this was fairly early on in his ministry. It was on an Easter vigil, where there were a number of large football players at this service, this liturgy that he conducted. And they brought in to worship that night a young boy who was paralyzed. And in order to get this boy into the church, they put these football players put the boy on their shoulders. And as they sang, "And we shall lift him up," they lifted the boy up. And something
It was
about
coincidental that
yes,
they were singing that.
Yes, and something about that just impacted him powerfully. And so his entire ministry has been focused on the resurrected Christ. He does a little 2-minute teaching segment daily called Fully Alive, which again is based on the idea that Christ gives us abundant life. So what you win people with is what you win people to. And so in this case, it was the hook of the resurrection that became the imprint of Father's life.
You know, we shrinks, Nick, you probably saw certain themes as you produced Al's show.
Sure.
You saw certain themes emerging in your thinking, hey, you know, this is something we could gather together
Yes.
to influence people to get closer to Christ. We shrinks wonder what it is about experiences that are so uniquely powerful to one human being. I may say this to someone else and they look at me like, okay, so you saw a young boy being lifted up by football players.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. It's warm, but life-changing.
Yeah.
What did you pick up in some of those interviews, Nick?
Well, that's why we wanted a divergence of these stories. We wanted them to be different so that these stories would reach people where they're at. Because like you said, not every story impacts every person in the same way. So if you're struggling with one thing, this story might speak to you. If you're struggling with another, another story might speak to you. And they really do run the gamut. I mean, there's very simple stories. Some people said, well, I don't know what I'd say. I don't have this, great grand moment. And we said, well, that's okay. Just think about your life and think about where God has touched you most. And so there's a very simple story by Chris Godfrey, who was won Super Bowls with the New York Giants. And he just simply talks about how he was an unsigned free agent coming out of college. He was picked up by 3 different teams over 3 years, was cut 3 times, and he just kind of fell on his knees and said, should I give up on this, God? And the next day, he got a call from the Green Bay Packers, and they signed him, and he ended up having an incredible career. Just that one small little moment. And you can go all the way to the other end with Joseph Pierce, who was a skinhead living in Britain, anti-Catholic, rabidly anti-Catholic.
He always seemed like that type. There's always those intellectuals you wonder about.
And he's there in jail serving a 1-year sentence. And that's where he starts to think about his life, and very different than Chris Godfrey.
Well, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for bringing these stories to our awareness and sharing them with folks. I could talk to these guys for a long time. I'm starting to get a little bit of a headache, though, because every time I talk to Al, my IQ starts to surge. It goes, and I can feel it kind of pounding in here, and I'm not used to being up this intellectually high in the stratosphere. Al, Kresta, Nick Thomm, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ray.
grown-up types have our education. We sit and talk. We have Al up here. We have Nick, myself. We're trying to sound pretty smart. We work at it. But there are some people among us who sound smart naturally, and they don't really have to work at it like we do. Hi, Mary Grace.
Hi.
How old are you, honey?
9.
Mary Grace. You know, I think with your mom and dad naming you Mary and Grace, oh, you can't help but be a sweetheart. Besides, you're too cute. You don't date until you're married. So if you want to try to get something, you want to go somewhere, you want to have a friend over, you want to have a sleepover, you want to have a certain play game, who would you ask first?
My dad.
Why?
He's easier to ask.
He is, huh? So you ask him, and he says, okay, but you have to ask your mom. Then what happens?
I ask her, and then if she says no, I just go to my room and play.
And you're that sweet about it? You don't argue?
Sometimes I do.
Oh, sometimes you do. Does she ever say, that's enough, young lady. You're getting a little snotty. Do you stop or you keep going?
Sometimes I keep going.
Does it work? Does she finally go, okay, Mary Grace, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead. Just do it. I don't care. Just do it. Go ahead. Just go. She ever do- No, that doesn't happen, huh? She's pretty tough. Okay. How do you know she means it? I mean, if your mom tells you to do something and you ignore it and you don't do it, you just kind of ignore it, fluff it off. How can you tell she means it? You better not mess with her now.
The things on top of her forehead get wavy.
The things on top of her forehead get wavy. Okay. And does she go, and your little dog too? Okay, the things on top of her forehead get wavy. Do you go to church? With mommy and daddy? Do you like it?
Yeah.
Do you? What's the best part about church?
Communion.
Communion. And what is communion, honey?
It's when you receive the body and the blood of Jesus.
Pretty special, isn't it? Yeah, maybe that's why you look so holy. You know that? That's probably it. Thank you, honey.
Welcome.
I'll see you later. She gets those little lines on her face that go squiggly. Problem I've always had is I just have squiggly lines on my face because I'm getting old and I just look squiggly all the time. Well, when you see a kid that sweet, makes me want to go home and punish my kids, you know? Anyway, did little Mary Grace spur anything that just comes to mind watching this picture of innocence here? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Your name?
My name's Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Mary Grace is sweet as sweet could be, and
On camera. Yeah.
I have some 20-somethings already, and they are, two of them actually questioning their faith. Mary Grace.
They were like that at one time, weren't they?
They were. Honest to goodness, they were. And I'm not sure exactly what to do at this point. I pray a lot and keep praying and hope that that's the solution. And any suggestions?
Sure. We lay down the faith as best we can. And then at some point, usually in the teens, early 20s, the faith has to become their own. They have to take what was mom or mom and dad's, embrace it themselves, and oftentimes it's sometimes this kind of journey. especially through the culture we live in that's in many respects godless. I would say this: you see little Mary Grace, you see that heart that she has for God, and what you find is that if that's left, and you think back as a parent wistfully, like, why couldn't it just stay like that? Why couldn't it be that way? I've been at this a long time. Most of the time, they come back. At some point, they realize that which was indelibly laid in me through baptism and instruction is still there, and it's still pulling. I used to have a Bible study in a prison when I was out of the church. I was in the evangelical world. The guys that would come to Bible study would oftentimes say to me, "You know, I was baptized Catholic." And they were the only ones in that whole prison population that were attending Bible study. And I had to wonder, was that baptism just something? When they hit that point in their life, that baptism did this. Well, we have got Father Larry Richards coming up. You know, shrink types like me say things like our morals are taught. They're taught to us. Father Larry says, there's morals laid down deep inside of us by our Creator. Stay tuned. Living Right with Dr. Ray. We'll be right back in a few.
God creates us and He makes the rules. And He writes them in our heart because all these rules are for our good.
What tends to happen is their personality can become more agitated, more irrational, and you try to use standard logic and reason, and it doesn't work. Who is wiser about life? The Catholic Church, founded by Jesus Christ some 2,000 years ago, or modern society, led oftentimes by modern psychology? I'm Dr. Ray. With me here on Catechism Wisdom, as always, is Father Larry Richards, pastor of St. Joseph's Church, Bread of Life Community in Erie, Pennsylvania, as well as, and I always put this in here because I've heard you speak many times, and it is truly a moving experience. I can't believe how many people move out once you start speaking.
I was just going to say, you got that. No purgatory if you've heard me.
Father Larry, this comes from the Catechism, section 1776.
It's an important number.
It is. And we've got here a catechism which has apparently been well used.
It ain't yours.
No, it is. Deep within his conscience, man discovers a law which he has not laid upon himself, but which he must obey. Its voice, ever calling him to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil, sounds in his heart at the right moment. For man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths.
Isn't that nice?
Well, but wait. I have my morals. You have your morals. I know what's right for me. That may not be right for you. Who are you to tell me what is right and what is wrong?
Again.
Thank you very much.
He's so convincing, huh? Again, what happens is God tells us what's right and wrong, just like we don't tell God. And see, that's the point. Like so often people say, well, I got to make my own decision. And I say, well, if you do that, then who are you? If you think something's right or you think something's wrong, then we should all bow down before you because then you are God. You decide what's right and wrong. And the same people that say, well, I don't have to listen to anybody. I'll bet you if you have kids and you sit there and your kids say, listen, you'll be in the house by 10 o'clock tonight. And your kids say, you love us, Dad, don't you? Yeah, I love you. Well, we all voted and we decided we're going to come in at 8 o'clock, right? That's okay, right, Dad? And if you're a father, you'll be, no, now you'll be in here at 7 o'clock, right? Because you're the father, you make the rules of the family, or the mother, or whatever. Same with God. God creates us and He makes the rules. And He writes them in our heart because all these rules are for our good, right? For instance, if God would say, if I put my hand in the fire, I get burnt, God would make a rule, if you will, don't put your hand in the fire. And we know that instinctively. Don't put your hand in the fire because you're going to get burnt from that, right? So it is, there is objective truth. And if there's no objective truth, then there is no truth by definition.
But my conscience tells me that if I want to live with my girlfriend, or if I want to not talk to my mother-in-law for 12 years, that my conscience finds no wrong in that.
And your conscience is ill-informed then, huh? You know, the church teaches that we have, our conscience needs to be formed in the right way. Because you could be brought up in a situation that you don't know anything, or your conscience was ill-formed. But there's still inside of us something that knows that we don't go around killing people normally. Now, even that's been screwed up when it comes to abortion. But there's still something inside most people that says to kill someone else is wrong. And we all know that. That's an instinctive thing inside of us.
Are you saying that the modern notion that we all need to determine what is good and right for ourselves is absolutely counter to the way God wrote His law somewhere deep in ourselves?
You are so smart, Dr. Ray. That's why I sit next to you. That is exactly correct. That God's way is always the best way. And if we don't look at God, then we become, or we try to become God ourselves. And that's as old all the way back to, if you take from that tree, you will become like God.
If I define my own morality, if I define my value system, then I am 100% good. Because by definition, I'm doing what I say is good and I'm avoiding what I say is wrong. So if it's wrong for me to cut down a tree, if that's a more serious sin than killing a baby in a womb, well, I'm 100% good. I'm following my morals.
And you're 100% wrong then, right? Because again, you're making yourself out to be the God of the universe. And like I often say, if you're the God of the universe, then you sit there and stop this from happening or stop that. You can't even take your next breath. That's how dependent you are. God could take your breath like that. So you can't be God of your life or your next breath. Who are you to be God of your own morality? It's a lie.
Well, that might explain why some people feel guilty who don't understand why they feel guilty.
Absolutely.
Because they've convinced themselves that I have a morality that's okay. Why does this bother me?
Because there's something put into us deep in our hearts. It's from God Himself. Even those who have abortions, by the horrible reality, they still have a guilt that they carry all the days of their life until they can be confronted with the reality that what I did was wrong, but then the God of the universe can still give me hope and give me love and give me mercy.
Conventional wisdom says, I define what's right and wrong. The Catechism, Scripture, the Church all say God defines what's right and wrong, and to help us, He wrote it deep within us. For Catechism Wisdom, I'm Dr. Ray. As always, with me, Father Larry Richards, learning more as he talks to me each time. When I was in graduate school, we did a lot of studying of folks who basically were called psychopaths. That was the old name for it. They don't use that name much anymore. And one of the defining features of a psychopath was no conscience. Absolutely no sense of guilt, being able to act in any way that he or she wanted to act. And by the way, more often than not, they were males. And I would wonder even then, what is it that they have to override? If in fact, and I knew enough about my faith then to say, if in fact God put the law in our hearts like a gravity, you defy gravity, you can stay up in the air for a while, then you're going to hit. You defy the law in your heart, you can stay up in the air for a while, then you're going to hit. And I remember thinking even then, well, how do they do this? I'd like to hear from you first. What questions, what comments did Father Larry spur from any of you? Yes, ma'am. I see if I can get this over to you. There you go. Your name?
My name is Pat.
Hi, Pat.
I'm dealing with a situation right now in our household where my husband of 28 years, and we have 6 children together, had a midlife crisis and decided he wanted to be happy in his own way, left me and the kids, went to live with his significant other who's 18 years younger, and neither one of them seem to have a problem with that. They don't see it as being wrong. They're happy. That's the way they're supposed to be. How do I help both myself and my kids kind of reconcile that?
Sure. First of all, I got to tell you, and forgive me for being incorrect in my maleness, femaleness here. Wives like you are my hero, okay? You go on, you persevere in life, you do what you have to do with situations thrust upon you totally out of your choosing. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, you be very careful, because the path you have taken to persevere and hope that your husband comes to his moral senses, everybody's going to look at you like, Pat, what's wrong with you? Get on with your life. Get remarried. You still got time left. You need to be happy. You're going to get hammered with that by everybody, oftentimes people you thought were religious. Which brings me to my third point. What is the preeminent virtue now in our culture? I want to be happy. Happy is what I seek. Anything that stands in the way of my own personal happiness as I define it, I will jettison. I see an awful lot of folks like you in therapy. And I tell most of them, you know, right now you're the one hurting. You are the one in the most emotional pain. Your husband doesn't realize what he did. Your husband, in all likelihood, someday is going to wake up. I threw over my wife, lost my relationship with my kids, because they're all going to look at him and say, what did our father do? Right now, you help those kids understand it's nothing personal. This is his weakness. He knows it's wrong. If you sat him down in my office and I asked him, is what you're doing okay? He'd probably squishy around it and say something like, well, most people probably wouldn't think it is. But he knows. He's just simply scalded his conscience. He knows. Also, the last thing I want to say for you, Pat, you don't take this personally either. You don't say to yourself, if I were a better wife, if I had nicer qualities, if I were younger, if I appealed to him more. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. You paid him kind of a convoluted comment when you said he had a midlife crisis. No, dear. He didn't have a midlife crisis. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. And kind of you and the kids were in the way. So you pray for him, you hope he comes to his senses, but you understand something, you and the kids are going to land on your feet. He's just traded one set of things that he thinks are dissatisfaction for another. God bless you. This question comes from Mary in Australia. Hello. You got to speak the language. My sister's only daughter has left home, leaving only a handwritten note. My sister had no warning beforehand. They had a great relationship, mother and daughter, plus 25 years. Now, the daughter is being moody, cold toward her. My sister is very hurt. Good news, bad news. As a shrink, it's kind of rare that all of a sudden somebody up and turns around. We had a wonderful relationship. Oh, I don't like you anymore. What was probably happening, this is the bad news, is that the daughter was building up all kinds of resentments, not necessarily through the mother's fault at all. The kid was looking at things mom was doing and building up. I don't like the way you are. I don't like the way you talk. I don't like the way you look postage stamps. I don't like your religion. I don't like the way you treat dad. I don't like the way you treat me. But for whatever the reason, the daughter didn't bring it out. Then one day she just goes, goodbye. I see that a lot. And when I talk to those folks in counseling and I start to ask them, they'll say things like, oh yeah, I never got along with my mom at all. Or I had these thoughts toward my family members. Anybody know it? No. You kept it to yourself? Yes. You never resolved it? No. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I tell parents in situations like that, somebody's got to leave the door open. Somebody's got to call every once in a while, send an email. Somebody's got to send a birthday card. Somebody's got to basically say, this door is cracked open. If you want to come in it, I'm not going to force myself on you, but if you want to come into this relationship again, the door is here. Now, you don't have to put your face there to get it slapped every 6 minutes, but you do little tiny things that you think you can do to basically say, okay, we're still here. I'm still here. I have many older children, and one of my daughters wanted to get out on her own, and boy, we didn't hear from her for the longest time. Periodically, we texted her, and that's a sacrifice for me. Texting? Are you kidding me? It takes me 2 hours to say hi. Texted, called, said hello. She's coming back around. But there for a while, it was, I'm living my life. I'm going to have a nice time. Mom and Dad, I love you. You're great, but not much contact. And I told my wife, I very supportively, in affirmation, told my wife, honey, you really messed it up. It's a good thing I'm here to pick up the pieces. Well, I got time maybe for one more quickie. Oh gosh, let's see if I can get to it here. This is from Jean, Kansas. I have a neighbor that I have to avoid for my sanity. I couldn't avoid this one day. We got into an argument. She said I was nuts, and I didn't have any friends. I had a meltdown. I exploded. She's 91 and very nosy and mean-spirited. I went to confession, and the priest said, why do you hug a bear? I feel like I'm in a cat and mouse game, and I'm the mouse. Help, Dr. Ray. Jean, you got to understand something, honey. I don't know the mental state of this 91-year-old woman. But there's probably a pretty good chance, given 91, that maybe she's just not quite functioning as well as she used to. And one of the first things you get into, trip switch tempers, anger. You know this, right? You brought up the question in dealing with folks. What tends to happen is their personality can become more agitated, more irrational, and you try to use standard logic and reason, and it doesn't work. It just bounces off. The only people that are more impervious to logic and reason are 14-year-olds. Yes. So I would say to Jean, the priest gave you good advice. Don't keep putting yourself there. You don't have to be in a cat and mouse game. Well, what did we learn today? We learned something as little as manners. If you have a standard, you're going to get buffeted. And that's just manners. That's not morals and character. What else did we learn? Kresta and Nick Thomm told us moments of grace, epiphanies, personal epiphanies, experience. The connection with God that brings so many people closer, and you can't put it into kind of a definition. Father Larry told us the natural law is written on the heart, and you can attempt to expunge it. You can make it cold, but it's always there. God wired it into us to keep us coming back to Him. And little Mary Grace, the real child psychologist, some of you have squiggly lines, and the only thing I'm thinking of is you may be mad at me right now. That's the only thing I know. I'm Dr. Ray Guarendi. Once again, I'm delighted you stayed with us during Living Right with Dr. Ray. Good Lord permitting, we'll be back. In the meantime, walk with God. You got kids, hold them tightly by the hand. Thank you.